This Equipment World video is brought to you by Chevron Delo 600 ADF Ultra Low Ash Diesel Engine Oil. It's time to kick some ash.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Equipment World. You're watching The Dirt. I'm your host Brian, and today I want to talk about one of everyone's favorite subjects in this industry, DEF. It's the worst, it's terrible, we all hate it, but it's a necessary evil, and I'll tell you why. So when emissions came into being, one of the first things that engineers developed was the DPF, diesel particulate filter. That's a filter that literally takes soot out of the exhaust stream as it blows through the filter, and it resides in that container or canister, whatever you want to call it, until the engine or the computer management system decides that it is time to burn that soot off. Then fuel is injected into the DPF at a very, very high temperature, which is the regen that we're all familiar with and we all hate. And it burns the soot off, and then you go about your day. And you can only do that so many times because at the end of the day, the DPF is a filter and it's going to get clogged up. And so it's really not the best or most ideal situation for your piece of equipment because they're really, really, really expensive. So if you do something to screw it up, you refuse to do a regen, or it just over time degrades and you have to replace that sucker, you're looking at a very hefty bill because these things are filled with really rare precious metals. So another alternative in applicable machines with engines that this actually works on is an SCR. An SCR is more like a catalytic converter. It has a component inside that actually reacts with the air passing or the exhaust passing through the SCR, and urea is injected into it to complete the chemical reaction. Believe it or not, as much as DEF is a pain in the butt to deal with, it's actually far less problematic than dealing with DPFs, which is why I've always been a proponent of DEF over DPFs. That being said, one of the things that's not talked about very much in the industry is how do you actually handle DEF properly? How do you prevent yourself from having a bunch of problems with your either DEF system or the SCR itself? And that's what I want to talk about today.
But before we get into that, I want to take a second to tell you about the sponsor of this video, Chevron Lubricants. Protecting your diesel engine and its exhaust aftertreatment system has traditionally been seen as an either-or proposition when it comes to choosing the engine oil that's going to protect your system. And that's exactly why Chevron spent more than a decade of R&D work developing a no-compromise formulation. Now, I don't have to tell you why a clogged DPF is bad news, but here's the real kick in the pants. 90% of that ash clogging up your DPF and then upping your fuel and maintenance costs, it comes from your engine oil. You might be thinking, why don't they make an engine oil with less ash in it then? You'll be happy to learn that Chevron agrees with you. They've developed a new ultra-low ash diesel engine oil that is specifically designed to combat DPF ash clogging. Delo 600 ADF with OmniMax technology cuts sulfate ash by 60%, radically reducing the rate of DPF clogging and extending the DPF service life by 2.5 times. Before you had to choose between protecting your engine or your aftertreatment system. Now you don't. Delo 600 ADF with OmniMax technology. It's time to kick some ash.
One of the biggest things I see in the industry that's not talked about as much as it should be is storing DEF containers in the back of your truck. We've all been there. You go to the convenience store, you're on a remote location, you've got 3 or 4 machines running, so you're at the store and you just buy 5 or 6 jugs of DEF and you throw them in the bed of your truck because you'd rather have them. It's better to be safe than sorry, right? Unfortunately, no. In this particular situation, you don't want to throw extra containers of DEF in the bed of your truck. One of the worst things you can do with DEF is leave it in the sun because it starts to degrade. Not only that, it starts to evaporate the liquid off, which means that the actual crystals of urea start to form inside the jug. Now, a lot of guys think, oh, well, that's no problem. I just shake this here jug up and add a little water and we're back to good, right? Unfortunately, no. Urea crystals don't just go back into solution when you add a little water. It's also really, really, really discouraged by pretty much every DEF manufacturer out there to add water to a DEF container because you don't have the proper ratio of water to urea. You're just kind of throwing some water in there and calling it good. This is actually something that's measured very specifically because your SCR needs a specific dose of urea. So it's really important that you don't try to rehydrate your DEF fluid when it starts to crystallize in the sun. In all honesty, if you want to save yourself headache, if you see any urea crystals inside your container, you just need to throw the container away. And I know that sucks. I know it hurts your heart, but believe me, that is far more affordable than dealing with a technician coming out to your job site, digging into your DEF tank to try to pull the screen out and clean it, or heaven forbid you have to replace one of your injectors on the SCR. Just throw it away. That's the biggest thing I can tell you is if there's crystals in the bucket or there's crystals in your DEF container, just throw it away. So that's number one. Don't store your containers in the bed of your pickup truck. It's number two, and I see this all the time, and I totally get it. Again, I get it. It's difficult to reach the DEF fill tube sometimes. And so we've got this really convenient funnel that we use for oil changes or we use for whatever we need. And it's sitting right there in the bed of my pickup. I'll grab my little blue shop towels. I'll wipe that sucker down. And it doesn't matter. I can't really get down in the neck there. And we'll use that to pour our DEF through so that we can get it in that fill tube. Guys, you can't do that. I'm sorry, but you can't do that. These DEF injectors have very, very tiny orifices in them, and that absolutely gets clogged with debris. Not to mention you're contaminating your urea with oil residue, with coolant residue. There's all sorts of other residues and fluids that have stuck to that funnel that you're now putting into your DEF tank. It's going to cause you issues. One of the biggest things we're all familiar with are the DEF sensors. They're usually things that have issues. If you coat those suckers with oil and coolant, you're going to have problems. So again, don't use anything other than the fill spout that comes with your little DEF container. If you need a special DEF container that has a spout, go buy a dedicated funnel and make sure you wash it out really well when you're done so that you don't have any crystals form in the funnel and down on the neck of the funnel that you can't really get your shop towel down. You need to have a very, very clean funnel in order to use it for DEF, and it needs to be dedicated to DEF. Again, when it comes to handling DEF, anytime you see crystals on anything, you need to get those crystals out of there because it will either plug up the screen within your DEF tank or it's going to plug up your injectors. If you're going to deal with DEF in bulk, which is a very common thing for large companies to do, again, we're going to go back to you need to be using specific dedicated containers to handle that DEF when you transfer it out of the bulk drums. And again, don't reuse DEF containers that you bought from the store because of the fact that you have crystallization happening in those. It's going to cause you clogs. So these are just some of the tips and tricks that I have for handling DEF. I don't want to get super ultra down in the weeds on this, but the biggest thing I want to tell you is don't mess around with DEF. It is something that you have to handle in a very specific way. It's not like any of the other fluids in the machine. And I realize this is a pain in the butt, but at the same time, I do want you to remember, you're not having to do regens on your machine and you're not going to have to replace a DPF filter if you do your job right with your DEF. If you treat your DEF system with care, mind you, all manufacturers have a machine that's finicky and troublesome and problematic with DEF. They're out there, I understand. But for the most part, the industry has gotten pretty good that as long as you as a contractor do a good job of handling your DEF, you shouldn't have the problems that we've traditionally been plagued with when it comes to these after treatment systems for your machine. So the last thing I want to tell you, we haven't had this problem as frequently as we used to, but I understand that DEF is urea, and urea is essentially ammonia. And ammonia happens to be one of the main ingredients in your pee. Guys, stop trying to pee in the DEF tank of your machines. I don't care if you're in the sticks and you've got the alarm screaming at you that it's going to put the machine into limp mode. It's never okay to pee into the DEF tank of your machine. That never works. It doesn't work. Your machine doesn't recognize it. And now you're going to have a very angry technician that has to come out and somehow empty your urine out of the DEF tank of your machine before he can service it and make the machine run correctly. I'm sorry, but if I was that technician, I would absolutely be giving you an earful and probably have you empty your own pee tank. So stop peeing in machines, guys. We've got to get better. And that's all I've got for you. So I hope this has been helpful. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode of The Dirt.